Nobody saw this coming. Watch a 100-year-old machine gun get a deadly second life on the Ukrainian front line. How a decommissioned Swedish IFV is pulling off miracle rescues, and stick around until the very end. An American Marine drops the brutal truth about the war in Ukraine. This machine gun was designed in 1918. The American Army has tried to replace it 3 times. 3 times they failed. And recently, they stopped trying altogether. Why? Because Ukrainian operators discovered something about this weapon that nobody expected. Something that doesn't just explain why it's still relevant. It explains why it might be the most important machine gun of the next 100 years. Stay until the end to see how this 100-year-old relic became a high-tech Terminator in the hands of Ukrainian soldiers.
Holy crap! This thing has nearly 200 parts.
200 parts? Is that a lot or a little? Other NATO machine guns average around 150 parts. The average Swiss watch has up to 180 parts. That means this machine gun is more mechanically complex than a watch movement. Yet nobody's losing sleep over something suddenly breaking down right when the enemy decides to push. Because at the same time, the M2 is one of the most reliable machine guns in the world. The US Army even stopped looking for a replacement. That's exactly why the Modus gets mounted on everything, from armored vehicles and patrol boats to pickup trucks and ATVs, and it's even being integrated into modern remote weapon stations and ground drones. The Browning M2 is the Snoop Dogg of machine guns. They bring it into every collab.
When it fires, even the guy pulling the trigger gets scared.
But there's one thing that almost no YouTube reviewer talks about. It was discovered by Ukrainian crews in real combat. And this particular thing might extend the M2's career by another 100 years. What exactly did Ukrainian M2 Browning operators discover? And why could this one feature keep the M2 Browning's career going? You're about to find out. Along the way, you'll also understand why the US Army really stopped looking for a replacement for the Modus. And maybe by the end of this video, you'll be shouting it yourself. Eureka! Hallelujah, John Moses Browning. But first, hit like and subscribe to this channel. Your likes, subscriptions, and comments are what help other viewers find our videos. Thank you. Fire! So you've already seen how .50 caliber BMG rounds shoot down Shaheeds, destroy fortified positions, punch through light armor, and literally change the course of a battle.
The M2 Browning can take apart an MTLB or an IFV.
The .50 caliber BMG is not just a bullet, it's a little explosion. Over 100 years of evolution, this caliber has become the gold standard of NATO. The muzzle energy of the bullet reaches up to 18,000 joules. Just to be clear, this is more than 10 times more powerful than a shot from an M16 or an AK-12. The American machine gun has no equal when it comes to its variety of ammunition. 12 types of rounds for the Modus are being supplied to Ukraine. These are the 12 apostles of Browning. But .50 caliber rounds are not the most powerful in their class. Yeah, in terms of power, they fall behind their Russian competitors. How can that be? The thing is that the Soviet, and now Russian equivalent, is a sledgehammer with a caliber of 12.7 by 108 millimeters. And the .50 caliber is 12.7 by 99 millimeters. These 9 millimeters of difference in the casing length make a huge difference, because such a casing holds about 15 to 20% more gunpowder, which gives the bullet more energy at the exit. That's why the M2 Browning is the most badass in the world, not because of its power. Its secret is hidden in this black box. This is the receiver. For the machine gun to start shooting, you need to perform a little ritual invented by John Moses Browning. Rack and release this big charging handle twice. Why exactly 2 times? The first time the bolt grabs around and feeds it into the barrel, and the second time, the firing pin gets into the position from which it will strike the primer upon pressing the metal trigger in the middle. But all the magic is in the fact that the firing pin only triggers when the round is seated inside the barrel. This system is called closed bolt firing. That is why the M2 Browning has a more complex locking mechanism and additional parts. But this complication makes sense, because the shot happens more smoothly, without extra vibrations, and with a short recoil. What does this give you? Incredible accuracy for a machine gun. Because before the shot, the heavy bolt of the Ma Deuce sits in place and doesn't push the machine gun around like it happens on MGs that operate on an open bolt firing scheme. For example, the FN MAG machine gun. Upon pulling the trigger, its bolt feeds the round and immediately fires. That means the shot happens in motion and not after a complete stop. Because of the extra vibrations, the accuracy suffers. But does a machine gun really need such sniper-like accuracy when its job is simply to dump a few pounds of metal in the direction of the enemy? That is a very solid point. Yeah, you don't need to be a sniper to let the enemy get within a distance of 20 meters and then pump them full of lead, just like the Ukrainian Ma Deuce operator does in this footage. In this situation, you just need to have balls of steel and a lot of ammo. You also don't need sniper accuracy when you're laying down suppressive fire from the roof of an M113 while approaching an enemy position or a friendly drop-off point. You can find a video about this old-school American IFV's weaponry on our channel, so we won't dwell on it here. You definitely don't need sniper accuracy when you're firing into the dark, guiding your aim solely by the sound of an enemy IFV's engine. However, accuracy matters when you only have a few seconds to take down a Shahed. Accuracy is vital for hitting hardware at a distance. An M2 operator can pick off the engine, the optics, or the crew, rather than just spraying the hull. Besides, the Ma Deuce is arguably the only heavy machine gun in the world that features a dedicated single-fire mode. If you mount some optics, the M2 transforms into a sniper rifle, and the machine gunner becomes a sniper. Of course, you've heard of Carlos Hathcock, who took out an enemy in Vietnam at a distance of 2,286 meters. But there are plenty of such cases in the war in Ukraine as well. Yet, when John Moses Browning created the Ma Deuce, he couldn't have imagined that its perfectly balanced mechanics, hidden inside that black box, would be so useful in the age of artificial intelligence. Today, the M2 Browning serves as the primary armament, not just for many remote weapon stations, but also for AI-driven combat systems.
Target to approach, and then the turret computer itself takes into account the height and other data already calculated by the rangefinder. Then when everything is calculated, I will see a sign indicating that the fire is authorized, and then it starts shooting.
Ukrainians have discovered that AI works perfectly with the M2 Browning, and this is changing the very concept of the machine gun. What was once just an accurate heavy weapon is turning into a high-precision instrument today. The thing is, the barrel and the bolt of the M2 Browning recoil strictly backward in a straight line. It's much easier for an AI to calculate recoil compensation when it's linear. Therefore, the fire control system knows the barrel will return to the exact same point. The Ma Deuce's design allows for the installation of an electromagnetic trigger that fires with a delay of only milliseconds. This makes it easier for the AI to calculate the shot timing down to microseconds, factoring in the target's speed. This makes machine gun fire insanely accurate. Where an operator would have spent 50 rounds, an AI-powered system gets it done in 3 to 5 shots.
Every time I see this, I'm like, yeah, the machines are definitely coming soon.
The fast electromagnetic trigger and barrel stability also simplify the work for operators who control unmanned ground vehicles, UGVs, remotely. Look at what a modern assault on a village looks like now, without any assault troops involved. A reconnaissance drone circles over enemy positions. The operator detects movement. Out here, every meter is a risk for a human. That's why the UGVs step into the game. In front of the UGV operator is a screen with a live feed from a camera and a thermal imager. The drone in the sky monitors the surrounding area. There's the house. A Russian infantryman tried to play a game of The Quick or the Dead, but the Ma Deuce shortens that title to just The Dead. Game over. And here's the thing. The American Army has tried more than once to replace the Browning M2 heavy machine gun. One of those options was the XM806 lightweight 50 caliber machine gun. The idea was simple: make the same machine gun, but lighter and more modern. However, it turned out that surpassing John Moses Browning is impossible, because that balance of complexity and reliability that the Ma Deuce has is like the laws of the universe. If you remove or add something, the system collapses. So, it was decided to spend money on things that actually simplify the machine gunner's job. M2A1 machine guns are already in the fight in Ukraine alongside Ma-Deuces from the World War II era. We might tell you about them in one of our upcoming videos. So, check if you've subscribed to our channel so you don't miss that episode. But for now, here is what is known about it. At the time of making this video, first, on the M2A1 version, the barrel can be swapped in a matter of seconds using a special carrying handle, which is critical in combat. Second, the headspace, the gap between the bolt and the breech of the barrel, was made fixed, because setting it on the old M2s requires specialized gauges and high operator qualification. Third, the M2A1 is equipped with a new flash hider that reduced the visible muzzle flash by 95%. Now the machine gunner's position is less visible at night. That's it. Nothing else needs to be changed to avoid breaking perfection. Hallelujah, John Moses Browning. But let us know in the comments, do you think there's a machine gun better than the M2? Or one that can even compare to it? Scrapped junk being disposed of cheaply in the war in Ukraine?
Seems like I'm stuck.
Or reliable armored all-terrain vehicles? Tough, no-nonsense workhorses.
Any puddle, any muddy slope we've got, she pulls through beautifully.
And well-armed on top of that?
Aviation cannon, very high rate of fire.
And easy to learn too?
The guys pick it up really fast, literally sit down and drive.
So what are the odds for this old iron in modern combat?
It only fires from a static position, because on the move, it has no stabilizer, it's useless.
How did Swedish PBV-302 armored vehicles from the Cold War era get their very first combat baptism in the 21st century, already well into retirement?
This vehicle is a 64 build.
And how useful, despite their age, have they actually proven to Ukrainian forces? So what do we usually picture when we hear Swedish weapons? Reliable? No fuss Gripen? Fighter jets? Sniper self-propelled howitzers like the Archer? State-of-the-art CV-90 IFVs? Sure, absolutely. But Swedish weapons, like anyone else's, weren't always quite this cutting edge. At first glance, this is the ugly duckling, a textbook example of Western Cold War armor. If this design looks a little strange to you too, hit like, but make sure you watch the story all the way through, and you'll understand exactly why it looks the way it does. Does it remind you of another very well-known vehicle? Of course it does. The legendary American APC, the M113. So are they related? No, just the same age. And that kind of design was extremely common back then. In the early 1960s, neutral Sweden was selecting a new armored vehicle for its military. The M113, cutting edge at the time, was on the table. But it was considered too expensive to produce and not well enough armed. And oddly enough, the Swedish military wasn't happy with the ramp, too slow. So they built a similar vehicle, but their own, the PBV-302, with doors instead of a ramp.
For example, these doors have two closing positions. To close them in the normal, unhurried way, we just close them. If we need a quick close, we flip out a special leg and shut the door. No handle needed, nothing. They don't seal tight, but it's very fast when you need it.
From 1966 to 1971, the Swedish defense industry produced around 6,500 of these vehicles.
For its time, it was genuinely a comfortable armored vehicle, one that infantry could actually enjoy riding in.
They served faithfully until the end of the 20th century, until the next generation CV-90s came along to replace them. The PBV-302 was finally retired only in 2014, but not scrapped, at least not all of them. And in May 2024, the Swedish government announced the transfer of all available vehicles to Ukraine, around 200 units. They were pulled back literally from the scrap heap of history, hopelessly outdated, morally and physically, but in fully working condition. And Ukrainian soldiers aren't known for being picky. They've seen worse.
Good vehicle, nothing bad to say about it. Sure, it has its quirks, but a machine of that age, and it still works, still gets the job done.
On top of that, on the Russian side, the equipment is generally from the same era. Soviet IFVs that didn't earn their grim reputation as infantry mass graves for nothing. So why do Western and Soviet armored vehicles look so different on the outside? In the Soviet Union, for decades the visual profile of vehicles was kept as low as possible. As a result, there was catastrophically little interior space in both the BMP-1 and BMP-2. In the West, user comfort was a much higher priority. So which armored vehicle design do you prefer? Let us know in the comments.
The troop compartment has 8 seats for dismounts, 8 seats total, plus storage space where the troops can keep their weapons, extra ammo, or rations they're carrying with them. If you compare it to the BMP-1, well, to Soviet automotive and military equipment in general, this machine was already designed with people in body armor in mind. You can see what the troop compartment looks like. I mean, at my height, when I think back to how I used to fold myself into that BMP, it was pretty rough. In here, it's a lot more manageable.
But is it really just about comfort? Or is there perhaps a different reason for all that extra space? Even back in the 1960s, Sweden was already thinking about the fastest possible evacuation of the wounded, and deliberately didn't rely solely on dedicated medical transport.
If we need to evacuate 4 wounded, guys on stretchers, we break all of this down, it all comes off, the mounted equipment gets removed, hung on the seats, and we can lay 2 casualties up top and 2 down below.
Is there anything else that backs up this theory? Well, for example, unlike the troop compartment, the crew stations for the commander, gunner, and driver are anything but spacious. They're cramped, to put it plainly.
This here is the gunner's position. Seems like there's even less room here. I'll still try to get in, but there's a real risk I won't be able to get back out on my own, and someone will have to drag me.
Even for a person of average build, working in conditions like that isn't exactly comfortable.
I don't know. You'd need some kind of dwarves working in here. I'm 1.76 m at about 5'9", and for me this is a serious squeeze.
Does that mean the PBV-302 is unfriendly to its crew? Not exactly, because the vehicle has other very significant advantages. If the reliable Volvo engine has some minor breakdown, it can be fixed without ever leaving the cab.
The engine access is really well thought out. It sits under the cover you're actually sitting on. The cover comes off with 3 bolts right here. If we've got a hose, a sensor, a filter change, or we need to bleed the system, we do all of that without leaving the vehicle, right from the commander's seat.
If you want to know everything about Western equipment in the war in Ukraine, make sure you subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. In terms of engineering quality, the Swedish armored vehicle clearly beats its Soviet contemporaries.
On those, just to remove the starter, you practically had to pull half the engine out. Here it's all accessible. Yeah, nice touch. She's smoother, this PBV, in the way she drives. Maybe some of you know, on the BMP, if a gear jams, you've got to wrestle with it to knock it loose. Here it's the opposite, just like a regular vehicle.
Another undeniable advantage, the PBV-302 is fitted with a remote track tension adjustment system. First, that's about how quickly you can adapt to different road surfaces. Second, it's about crew safety. They don't have to step outside for something minor.
Wherever we're driving, we can either tighten or loosen the tracks depending on the conditions. At the training base, we put a pretty serious number of kilometers on it. Not once did the tracks throw a shoe. Compared to our BMPs, it's very hard to detrack.
So how does all of this translate into off-road performance for a vehicle that doesn't exactly look the part? Ukrainian soldiers are genuinely impressed by it.
It's practically on par with the BMP, maybe even better in some ways. Any puddle, any muddy slope we've got, she pulls through beautifully.
So what about the weapons? Unlike the M113, which only has a machine gun for self-defense, the PBV-302 was fitted with a 20mm automatic cannon.
It's an aviation cannon, very high rate of fire, but the ammunition feeds through a magazine. The magazine is 3-row, and we can load 30 rounds.
And that cannon can fire up to 8 rounds per second, meaning that in an intense firefight, you'll be swapping magazines every few seconds. And every one of those pauses is a window of opportunity for the enemy.
If we run out of rounds in the cannon, we can't fire. Can't fire, we're as good as dead.
So how much of a design flaw is this? For comparison, American Bradleys and Soviet BMP-2s feed ammunition in belts of several hundred rounds, which allows sustained fire for far longer without interruption. On top of that, the PBV-302's cannon has no stabilizer, so it can't fire on the move.
Так як в неї немає
Since it has no stabilizer, it only fires from a static position. On the move, it's chaotic. Rounds going nowhere. We need to work a tree line. We stop, the gunner acquires the target, we fire, and then we move.
Back in the 1960s, the PBV-302 was adopted specifically as an infantry fighting vehicle. But by modern standards, its firepower can be described as limited, and that's putting it generously. That said, beyond ground targets, this cannon can also engage aerial threats.
There's also a separate site for engaging aerial targets. It's mounted here on the turret. We can fire on low-flying targets up to 2 kilometers, about 1.2 miles, away. But I have to be up on top of the turret to do it, and search for targets myself.
In practice, though, that function isn't unique to this vehicle. Plenty of other armored vehicles nominally have it too. But given the primitive sighting equipment, in reality they'd have a hard time hitting anything other than a helicopter hovering in place. So can the PBV-302 really be called an IFV? Probably not. It's more of an APC, an armored all-terrain carrier. But how well does it actually protect its crew? Like any light armored vehicle of that era, the PBV-302 has bullet-resistant armor. And in today's environment, that's simply not enough. Though as we know, even the legendary American Abrams tank wasn't ready for modern threats. When strike drones dominate the battlefield this completely, every piece of equipment needs specialized protection.
рішотки це ми обварювали вже.
The grills, we welded those on ourselves at the repair battalion. The guys put in the work. The camo net we stretched ourselves too. They only pre-installed the anti-drone pipe frames for us.
So how well does this improvised protection actually hold up? All these nets and grills make an already limited view from inside the vehicle even worse, and skilled FPV drone operators eventually find the weak spots anyway. But the armor does protect what matters most, the lives of the crew, who usually manage to get out before the vehicle is completely destroyed. So what's the bottom line? By modern standards, the PBV-302 is clearly not a frontline combat vehicle.
Як бачите,
As you can see, it's very uncomfortable for both the driver and the gunner. I don't know, these are some kind of old standards. Maybe people were smaller back then. These days you've got big, solid guys. From a safety standpoint, it's a minus because you can't be in there wearing body armor and a helmet. Yeah, it is what it is.
So this APC typically handles logistics tasks instead.
поэтому ми і використовуємо.
We use it for personnel rotations, for evacuating the wounded, the 300s. You can see for yourself, it's done much faster here. No need for all that maneuvering, stripping off body armor and so on. And in terms of mobility and armor, it runs circles around Soviet equipment.
Given the vehicle's limited capabilities, is this whole thing even worth it? And does this particular piece of Swedish aid actually deserve genuine gratitude? To answer that, just look at what the Russians are trying to advance with. Civilian cars, motorcycles, horses, and yes, even donkeys. And none of that is because of some twisted fondness for extreme adventure. They are catastrophically short on armored vehicles. So any vehicle that has even some armor, some weapons, and decent off-road capability is already a serious advantage over an enemy that's literally saddling up donkeys. Can a donkey compete with an APC on the battlefield? Drop your thoughts in the comments.
Did they come up to you here?
Yes, I started to meet them, thinking I'd let them come closer. Then I hear, "Give me a grenade."
Up close, he was just terrifying because he was completely covered in stuff. He had a frame on him, metal mesh, then a metal profile, garbage bags, bags literally stuffed with trash. Also, it could absorb as much fire as possible, draw away FPV strikes, and take the hit itself, whether from infantry or from a BMP. Right then, my brother-in-arms shaman, who is now actually my commander, made the decision that he would take the fight and I would cover him from above with the drone. Because my combat crew is a drop crew, meaning a strike crew.
Well, I grabbed the disposable launchers then and ran to meet him, periodically running back and forth, trying to see where he was moving so I could orient myself.
He immediately put on his gear and went out to meet them, just to meet them head-on so they wouldn't reach our shelter. At the same time, I was preparing the drone, running out, carrying it out, and already launching to meet the enemy.
There's noise everywhere, and you only see the little tank when it's basically right in front of you. And once I realized he was coming straight toward us, and nowhere else, I ran into this side trench off the main one and waited for him there. He pulled level with me, and I saw that one side of the metal armor had already been torn apart by FPV hits, right near the turret ring. So I aimed there and fired. He drove another about 50 meters, around 165 feet, and started turning toward the field, and they kept burning him there with FPVs, burning him and burning him. Then, when the tank stopped, the Russians dismounted from it and ran toward the tree line. And that's when the FPVs really started buzzing. I ran into the dugout, grabbed a box of grenades, brought out extra ammunition, and took up a defensive position.
So you wanted to drop on them, try to drop a payload on them, but in a way that wouldn't hit Shaman with fragments too?
Yes, exactly. Because they came up, not going to lie, about 15 meters, maybe 20 meters, roughly 50 to 65 feet from the dugout max. We clearly heard that they were already gathering, preparing grenades. They knew where they were going. Maybe they didn't know there were pilots here, but they knew there was a shelter and that we were sitting there, that we were there.
I wanted to catch them by surprise. I thought I'd let them get closer. When they came up, there were pretty thick bushes there. I heard one of them say, "Give me a grenade." They must have seen our trench. I thought, well, now they'll either start throwing them in, so it's time to open fire. I opened fire through the bushes, and one of them screamed.
Basically, already from the first drop, one of them was wounded. Shaman had immediately shot the first one in the arm and was shouting for them to surrender. We were waiting for that moment, hoping they would just give up and surrender.
Surrender! Come out into the field.
But they didn't want to. They started firing back intensely at the guys. So I worked with the drop. I wounded the second one. The third saw that the first one had been shot in the arm and threw down his weapon. The second one was left with shattered legs. The third immediately ran off.
Plus, the battalion commander turned our FPVs toward them, and they started hammering them. They started stretching out, trying to get away. I started pressing them too. We finished controlling them. One of them ran to the end of the tree line. There was a mortar position there. One ran toward it. The mortar guys finished him off there. Well, and that's basically how that day ended. And they had come up to us with grenades and started trying to f us up.
They came right up to you?
Yes. I started meeting them, thinking I'd let them come closer. Then I hear, "Give me a grenade."
But the next day, there were also, let's say, adventures, because a fourth Russian came to us, who simply hid in the bushes. And by the way, Shaman heard him too. I stepped outside, breathed some air, just stood there breathing. You go back into the dugout, and he was there like, you know, as if a person had been resting. Woke up, and something just felt off. His instinct kicked in. He went outside. And that's when he heard that fourth one transmitting information over the radio. Branches were crunching under him.
And we didn't even understand where he came from.
Well, everything was so intense. Everything happened so fast. You couldn't predict the route he took. At first, 2 tanks were heading toward us. The first one stopped, turned around, and still drove away. FPVs were hitting them hard.
Those tanks were just a welded shack. When it finally drove up toward us, it was like a 2-story house rolling forward, welded over with everything possible.
As I understand it, their reconnaissance must have explained the routes to them, because they actually passed our infantry. And certain structures that are meant to take on armored vehicles in a fight, things like that. First of all, I was afraid he would just drive up, turn the barrel toward us, and fire. My combat experience at that time was still fairly small.
So, what were your thoughts at that moment overall?
Thoughts? Just that either he would arrive or he wouldn't make it because of the FPVs. I don't know. That specific tank that came to us was definitely hit by about 15 units. The scariest days in war are exactly those moments when there's silence. At that time there was quiet, no movement, no targets. And then in a single moment, an assault. Vehicles, a BMP, infantry, several tanks.
And while they were driving toward us, we destroyed some of their equipment. Well, our FPV pilots did. Some of the vehicles, I think one BMP turned around and ran. Another one got stuck in the mud. And it was also taken apart by FPVs.
It was good that we got into that kind of connection together, supporting each other, explaining the situation to each other.
He worked perfectly. Later, he even said, "I don't want to go to positions with anyone else anymore, only with you." He said if I had been with someone else, we probably would have died. I told him, well, experience. It's all experience.
But a huge thanks goes specifically to our battalion commander.
You are men with enormous steel balls. Sincere thanks for the work. From my side, I promise that such actions will not go unnoticed.
Because at that moment he took over control, I remember, and started giving commands specifically to cover us, to help us, and that continued until the very end.
We are home again, on the sticky, cold, gray Donbass.
The mission is simple. Roll into the tree line, hit them, and come back. Same route as before.
The Strv-122 lurches off the dirt road and crashes into the tree line like a bear showing up uninvited to a rabbit party. Hard stop. The Russians' last hope? That they hadn't been spotted. But no. The Strv-122 commander has eyes on them. The turret swings their way. Trees snap like matchsticks. Boom! The blast wave throws trees, dirt, and debris in every direction. It looks like the kind of place where, even years from now, you'll be able to tell exactly what happened here. Boom! Could anyone possibly survive that?
11 rounds. What do you think yourself, man?
Looking into this guy's eyes is like staring down the barrel of an Strv-122 the moment it fires. His crew does this job several times a day, and every single time it's an insanely close distance. Every single time, the same route, and anyone with steel nerves and an RPG in their hands could end it right there. Is that really how tanks are supposed to fight? And here's the thing. The Russians eventually did track down this Strv-122. Why did the Ukrainians keep using the same route and pulling up right to the edge of Russian positions? Why risk a rare, nearly exclusive to this war asset like the Strv-122 when there are drones, artillery, or CV-90 IFVs, which also fight in this unit, that could do the job? And finally, what happened to the tank and its crew? You're about to see all of it. Along the way, you'll also find out whether the Strv-122's weak spots are any different from those of the Leopard 2 it's built on. But before we get into it, please hit like and subscribe to our channel if you're enjoying this format. It genuinely helps us push the video out to more people. Thank you. So the story starts with the Strv-122 crew commander receiving an order to destroy yet another fortified Russian position. The tank's firing position is marked on the map. And get this, the distance to the enemy turns out to be just 250 meters. That's an anomaly, because that's a critically short distance. Even a bad shooter can hit a tank with an RPG at that range. Even an idiot with an assault rifle can put a burst toward the Strv-122 and take out its optics. But orders aren't up for debate. The Strv-122 commander's job is to figure out the approach route to the firing position and the withdrawal route after the mission is done. He could do that off a map, but instead, the tank commander decides to walk the route on foot first. And why would he do that? First, a map and UAV recon footage don't give you the full picture of actual ground conditions and small obstacles that can be fatal for a heavy vehicle. Second, it's critical for a tank to find a spot where it can see the target, but stay as hidden as possible behind terrain features, so a Russian ATGM can't reach it. That's why even a half-meter rise in the ground matters, because at 250 meters, you're well within direct line of sight. But the third reason is the most important. The enemy could have planted anti-tank mines on the likely approach routes. A foot reconnaissance lets you visually check the track for freshly turned soil and other signs.
I personally scouted everything and picked the exact spot where the tank needed to be.
This guy is a serious warrior. He didn't ask command why a tank specifically had to do this job. Because you don't question orders. But you and I aren't in the army. We're sitting on the couch. So after the fight, we'll find out why everything went down the way it did. So at dawn, before the sun or Russian drones had a chance to get up over the battlefield, the Strv-122 rolls out of cover to give the Russians a very bad morning. We're not revealing the exact location of the tank because fighting is still ongoing there. At first, everything goes smoothly. The tank covers the route quickly, rolls into position, and starts firing. After the fourth shot, the commander can tell the mission is done. The building where the Russians had dug in is destroyed.
We did everything and came back, but after noon they told me we needed to do it again.
Well, orders aren't up for debate. But there's no time to plan and scout a different route. And taking a different path carries almost a 100% chance of hitting a mine, because every field and road on the front line is littered with them. Taking the previous route turns out to be a few percentage points safer. And here's what happens next. The tank reaches the position again without incident and fires another 4 rounds. That leaves 11 rounds still in reserve, because the upper ready rack of the Strv-122 holds 15 shells. But on the way back, the commander spots an enemy through his optics, hiding in a nearby tree line. The decision is made in an instant. The Strv-122 sharply changes direction and plunges into the unknown. What happened next? You already saw at the start of this video. And what comes after that? You're about to see right now. So the Strv-122 tears apart the enemy position and races back to base. But that engagement lasted several minutes, just long enough to cost the crew the safe distance they needed. Despite the Swedish tank's high speed, a drone catches up and hits it. The tank stops, and the next drone catches up right after. The Strv-122 has an emergency escape hatch in the hull floor, located directly under the loader's position. But the crew doesn't rush to bail out, because the engine is still running. And that means there's still a chance to drive out of there.
That hesitation actually saved us, because while we were figuring out what to do next, another one came in.
When the drone attack finally pauses, the guys get out and make it to cover in time. But why can't a tank with a running engine actually move?
Bottom line, they hit the radiators. The engine has an emergency mode, but the transmission's automatic protection kicked in and locked it up.
Right. The most vulnerable spot on both the Leopard 2 and the Strv-122 built on its platform is this section here, on top of the transmission compartment. That's where 2 large ring-shaped radiators sit, with powerful fans. They cool both the engine coolant and the transmission fluid. Knock those out, and the tank isn't going anywhere. Of course, the Russians know this. So this isn't the first time a tank has been stopped by exactly this kind of damage. We actually have a video on our channel about the Leopard 2's adventures near Pokrovsk, where the tank took very similar damage. But this layout has advantages that outweigh all the downsides. The radiators are large metal structures filled with fluid. When fragments, a bullet, or even a small shaped charged jet from a drone hits them, the radiator takes the blow instead of the engine. Yes, the tank loses coolant, can overheat, and may even stop. But the engine itself and the expensive transmission stay intact. So credit where it's due. Hats off to the German engineers for that design choice. But what actually happened to this tank?
The next evening I went back and got it.
So let's take a look at how the Strv-122 came through the drone attack. Look, the external protection and metal grills took damage, but the armor itself is untouched. The crew handles the repairs themselves. New grills get welded on. Fresh contact 1 blocks get bolted up. The same ones Leopard 2s use in this war. The loader turns into a metal worker.
A 19mm wrench is the main tool around here.
The driver mechanic becomes a welder.
The Strv-122 is a great tough piece of kit, but fiber optic FPVs are really hurting us. Still, we always find ways to cover our armor.
So, including the radiator replacement, which takes at least 6 hours on its own, the full restoration of the Strv-122 took less than a day. We wish the crew luck on their next missions. But now it's time to answer the real question. Does it actually make sense to use tanks in close-range combat? Let's start with artillery, since it packs the same punch but operates from a safe distance. But it's not that simple. After the very first shot, the gun gets picked up almost immediately by Russian counter-battery radars and can draw return fire very fast. So artillery isn't risked on small targets. It's saved for big strikes. Maybe the CV-90 IFVs, which also fight in this unit, would be a better fit for this kind of task. Sure, the 40mm Bofors cannon can fire programmable rounds that airburst and shred infantry with tungsten pellets. But turning a fortified position into rubble? Neither those rounds nor anything else in the CV-90's arsenal can do that. You can see exactly why in our separate video on the Swedish IFV. It seems like the most versatile tool of this war remains the drone. But tanks do get used where drones can't get the job done, whether because of bad weather or Russian EW jamming. Radio interference often cuts Ukrainian drones off before they even get close to enemy positions. An EW system has zero effect on a tank, though. On top of that, most UAVs carry a small warhead, not enough to destroy a fortified position and get the people sitting inside bunkers or behind walls. A tank round is a different story entirely. It punches through cover and detonates inside. In a minute or two, a tank can put out a dozen shells and simply flatten a position, making it completely unusable. There's no way to achieve that effect with drones.
From radio intercepts on their side, we heard that what they fear most is our tank fire.
And that says it all. When you need to break the enemy's will to fight, you send in a tank. Just its appearance on the battlefield triggers panic. Direct fire demoralizes far more than drones ever could. You really don't want to find yourself under that kind of fire. And that's probably exactly why Ukrainian command decided to put the Strv-122 into the fight. Here's our takeaway. In many situations, a tank is more effective than any other tool available because it's a mobile, armored vehicle with a precise and powerful gun that can engage fast and reposition just as fast. But drop a comment and tell us what you think about this specific operation and about the future of tanks in general. Will we still see them in the next wars? Or has their time finally passed? We reviewed dozens of strikes on American tanks in Ukraine and counted no fewer than 10 ways to destroy one of the best tanks in the world, even with additional protection bolted on. And here is exactly how one of those deadly scenarios usually plays out. The Abrams crew can't hear the drone. The armor turns the tank into a solid safe. The expensive EW system on the roof adds to that feeling of being untouchable, like everything's been thought of, but that's a completely false sense of reality.
We were counting on having the armor here. We just weren't warned that they'd removed it.
This Ukrainian tanker is talking about the depleted uranium armor that isn't fitted on the Ukrainian version of the Abrams. So Donbass, where the Abrams made its combat debut in early 2024, became its Armageddon. American tanks haven't taken a beating this hard since World War II.
If they'd informed us earlier, we could have fitted Contact 1 in time and saved both the vehicles and the personnel.
What's wrong with the Abrams armor package for Ukraine? Why does even the add-on protection fail to save them? And would the classified depleted uranium armor have made a difference? You're about to find out. And then we'll get into the new protection solution that American tankers came up with themselves, because they've been watching the same footage you're about to see, very carefully. Fair warning though, there are a lot of destroyed American tanks ahead. A lot. If the hard truth doesn't scare you, hit that like button, so this video reaches as many people as possible. Thank you. So let's start with a secret that's over 40 years old. The Abrams really does have a special armor variant that incorporates depleted uranium, but that doesn't mean the tank is made of uranium. DU armor is a multi-layer sandwich of steel, ceramic, and other classified components. with depleted uranium plates sitting inside that sandwich. But no country in the world that operates the Abrams has the DU armor version, so it's no surprise Ukraine didn't get it either. So what armor does the Ukrainian variant of the Abrams actually have? Instead of the classified depleted uranium inserts, the armor package uses a combination of ceramic, steel, and tungsten. That's the standard configuration for all export Abrams variants, essentially an analog of the Chobham Burlington armor. So how does it hold up under fire?
If an ATGM hits, the missile punches straight through the tank, enters the turret from the driver's side, and exits out the other side.
An anti-tank missile is a serious piece of hardware. The Russians claim that in this footage, a Russian T-72B3 is firing exactly that kind of missile. However, that can't be confirmed due to a rough cut in the edit. But based on the nature of the explosion, it's safe to say this is an anti-tank missile, most likely fired from an ATGM system of the Cornet type. Anti-tank missiles carry a tandem-shaped charge warhead. The first charge detonates the ERA, if there is any, and milliseconds later, the second charge punches through the main armor with a jet of molten metal. But what happens when there's no ERA at all? Without explosive reactive armor, a tandem anti-tank missile becomes even more lethal because the armor takes a double hit with nothing to disrupt it. By design, the Abrams should be able to absorb that hit.
Oh no, its armor no longer meets modern battlefield requirements.
That's exactly why the Ukrainians started fitting Contact 1 ERA. They were counting on it heavily, but those hopes burned away like smoke after a shot. If you're already subscribed to our channel, you've probably seen the video where Ukrainian tankers walk through exactly how they bolt those Soviet-era blocks onto American armor. So we'll save your time and skip over that here. But if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, so you don't miss our videos covering how Western weapons actually perform in real combat conditions. So with Contact 1 in the picture, the Abrams battlefield survivability seemed to improve. But the Russians quickly figured out a new way to kill American tanks. Drones, the curse of this war. But a drone carries a smaller shaped charge than an ATGM. So why is it actually more dangerous than an anti-tank missile? Here's the thing. An anti-tank missile flies up to 5 kilometers along a laser beam, which means the tank has to be in the direct line of sight of the operator. Those conditions don't come up very often. On top of that, on Russian ATGMs, the gunner can't redirect the missile into the rear or the roof if the tank is facing them head-on. In other words, where the missile hits depends entirely on how the tank is positioned, and if it strikes the frontal turret armor from long range, there's a real chance the Abrams will take the hit and survive. But a drone has none of those limitations. It flies for many kilometers, and the operator, sitting safely in the rear, can choose exactly where and when to strike. While the frontal turret armor of the Abrams handles a drone hit just fine. If the strike lands on the turret roof, where the armor is thin, there are no chances. Drones swoop down like vultures from the sky and can tear an Abrams apart in literally just a few minutes. An experienced operator can even thread a strike into the gap between add-on protection blocks. So how do you defend against this? The stopgap solution was protective netting, which stops the drone at a safe distance from the armor. But experienced operators work in teams. First they tear through the net, then they send the next drone straight through the hole. So EW systems became the better answer. The thing is, drones are controlled over a radio channel, but when a drone enters an EW jamming zone, instead of a clear picture, the operator sees this. The interference stops operators from guiding drones into the Abrams' most vulnerable spots, or the drones lose the signal entirely and drop. But that advantage didn't last long. A different type of drone appeared on the battlefield. This little killer's flight doesn't depend on radio waves at all. Trailing behind it in the air is an almost invisible fiber optic thread, stretching 10, sometimes 20 kilometers. It's thin and nearly transparent, but tough as a nerve fiber. So the operator sees his target perfectly, even right next to an EW system. Right now, the Abrams on the battlefield is like a mammoth that knows its time has passed. First, A recon UAV appears in the sky, hovering high above the battlefield, patiently looking down. To it, a tank is just a large, warm machine visible through the trees. Once the target is found, the hunt begins. Fiber optic strike drones go up into the air. They fly low to the ground, hugging tree lines, hills, and ruins. Sometimes there are several of them at once. The operator takes his time and carefully searches for a weak point. He knows the frontal armor of the Abrams is extremely tough, so the drone doesn't go for the front. His targets are the turret roof, the engine compartment, or the rear hull. The armor there is far thinner. The goal? Immobilize the tank. While the Abrams is absorbing hits, the crew has time to bail out and take cover. The final seconds of a tank's life look almost identical every time. So would the classified depleted uranium armor have saved the Abrams? Each DU armor plate is 19 millimeters thick, which is equivalent to 40 millimeters of conventional armor. Each armor package with DU armor has a thickness equivalent to 900 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. But they're only fitted to the front of the turret, specifically on these cheeks. Why? Statistics from previous wars show that up to 80% of hits in tank-on-tank combat land right there, because the lower hull is almost always hidden behind terrain folds, bushes, or debris. And the survive and fire tactic used by Abrams crews in defense assumes the tank is sitting in a hull-down position, engaging targets with precision fire, thanks to its excellent optics and fire control system. But in this war, there are no tank duels. And instead of survive and fire, crews are operating on a shoot and scoot principle. Because the main threat is drones, and they only need a few minutes to find a tank and hit it from behind. So DU armor has lost much of its former relevance. So it goes. Of course, the Ukrainians will come up with something new, as they have many times throughout this war. And here's how American tankers have absorbed the Ukrainian experience. Right now, 350 American tanks are being fitted with a new passive protection system, the GM1914 VPS Top Attack Protection. This is a passive add-on armor system installed over the upper hemisphere of the hull and turret on top of the base armor. Interesting to see how it will protect against FPV drones, loitering munitions, and top attack anti-tank missiles in the next Gulf War with Iran. Here's what we found out when a drone or a missile with a shaped charge warhead hits a VPS panel. The multi-layer composite materials cause the warhead to detonate prematurely and disrupt the formation of the high-velocity shaped charge jet. As a result, the penetrating power of the munition is significantly reduced, and the Abrams' thin roof armor takes a much weaker hit. If it's a drone drop or a fragmentation round, the multi-layer VPS structure absorbs the blast wave and catches the fragments, preventing them from punching through the thin armor around the hatches or damaging the observation equipment. But the most important thing, this is a factory solution. No nets, no improvised cages, no heavy contact one blocks bolted on. The panels are designed as individual segments that can be quickly swapped out in the field after taking damage. Sounds impressive, but drop a comment below. Will this new VPS Top Attack Protection System make the Abrams great again and redefine its role in the war with Iran? Either way, we want to hear what you think. Show me your hands. On your knees, please. These are just basic forms of address from a well-mannered man. Please and thank you. That's why I talk like that. I'm not going to shoot. I'm an American. I don't really understand Russian. And that's an important point. Staying calm with the enemy. Showing that you control the situation. Showing them you're not about to put a round between their eyes the second they drop to their knees. Enjoy your meal. In that area, there were 4 Russians. 2 surrendered quickly, and 2 more stayed inside the dugout. So I tossed 3 grenades in through the chimney, Then I waited for our FPV drone to come in and blow the door off. After that, I realized I had a solid chance to clear that dugout. All right. Show me your hands. I cleared the dugout and took those two prisoner. I'm not going to shoot. I'm an American. I don't really understand Russian. Then we moved them to a nearby position, and from there they were evacuated off the line of contact. Quiet. Get these guys into cover.
You've definitely seen this video of an incredibly polite American taking a Russian prisoner. Let's give you a bit more context. This soldier is fighting in the Ghosts unit, 63rd Separate Mechanized Brigade of the 3rd Army Corps. We wanted to introduce you to him a bit more. Hello, good to see you.
Hi, nice to meet you. You're wounded? He says it's been hurting for a long time. I'm from California, USA, and I've been here almost a year.
Yeah, this definitely isn't California. It's a lot colder here.
Yeah, much colder. As a Californian, I wasn't ready for this kind of weather. But there are other guys from California here too. And overall, we're figuring it out somehow.
We're recording this interview in English, but honestly, it feels like we could do it in Ukrainian too. Your Ukrainian is incredible. I'd say you sound almost like a local, especially remembering that moment when you took those Russians prisoner. That was an insane level of language skill. I'm talking about that now legendary video where you spoke to them so politely.
Do you have a lighter?
But that's actually dangerous. You must have been really nervous. In those conditions, especially when you need to be extremely careful, it would probably be more comfortable to speak English. But you were speaking Ukrainian.
It's all good. It's all good. Come here. It's all good. Wounded? Yeah, I've had a lot of Ukrainian teachers, and again, it's just basic manners. Please and thank you. That's why I talk like that. I've taken quite a few Russians prisoner already. And there have been a lot of firefights too. So now, when it's time to engage or take prisoners, just doing the job, I'm much calmer. I feel pretty comfortable because during these ops we have contact almost every day. Sometimes we clear several positions in a single day. So it's something not just I've done many times, but my whole group has. And that's key, staying calm with the enemy, showing you're in control. It's all good. I'm not gonna shoot. Showing them you're not about to put a bullet between their eyes the moment they kneel. Not scaring them. It makes my job easier. Less chance they'll try to run. Less chance they'll start firing if they think that's their only option. For me, when I'm carrying out a mission, it's just work.
Now that we have somewhat of a sense on how to clear houses, this will be the next step when it comes to working as a team. The guns, the rifles will be orientated on this building, allowing Bravo team to come and take this building.
I try not to shut off my feelings and emotions. So yeah, I try to stay as calm, cold-blooded and collected as possible.
So it's like a conversational Ukrainian practice club. On Russians?
Yeah, I've got infantry Ukrainian.
Storm the Peter, but
but I don't know how to say drop a like and subscribe.
In the infantry, that's normal. You can go uncensored here, right?
Well, then you can add,
Пиздец and нахуй and all those заебись.
Yeah, those are definitely popular phrases. They're not in the Ranger handbook, but they're very popular.
Into this fucking room, grab him fucking self on fucking covers. So you have to fucking stack up right here on this fucking door. Wait for a fucking squeeze. After you say fucking door left.
Okay, what can you say about Russian soldiers?
what can I say about them? I've met former criminals. There was a guy from Uzbekistan who used to work in Russia. He got caught with a gram of weed, marijuana. They told him, either they beat and rape you, or prison. Or you go serve in the army for a year. He chose the army. And the moment he got to the front, he walked toward our positions and surrendered to the first drone he saw. There were also prisoners who said they had sick relatives and needed money for treatment. I once asked a Russian, and one guy said he's here because he loves Russia. But most of the time, it's the same story. They sign a contract to make money, think it'll be easy, and then they get sent to the front with minimal gear and minimal training.
Did you have prior military experience? Did you serve before this war?
Yeah, I served 4 years in the US Marine Corps. The tactics I use here, I've taken some from training with the Green Berets, some from training with the Israeli Defense Forces, and of course some from the Marines. And some are tactics we picked up here in Ukraine. I try to take the best tactics from all worlds. And that's what we drill every day in my unit.
Everywhere, security. Control tam, викло tam, и так, и все.
Your group is called Ghosts. Can you tell us more about it?
At first, the group was mostly foreigners. 3 foreigners and 1 Ukrainian from different battalions. We came together and started working in the forest as a reconnaissance and assault group, as well as a clearing team. We showed good results, so our brigade, our battalion, decided to keep using us in that role. It all started last fall. And since then, we've done a lot of good work. A lot of effective work.
So, it's super important that when we have the first man breach and go inside this room, that somebody's right there.
Honestly, this is my new home now. Kramatorsk, especially Sloviansk. I already see these places as home. When I went on leave, I didn't go back to the US. I decided to stay in Ukraine and get to know it better. I've been living here for a year, and all that time I've been in the same operational area, fighting for the same cities. So now I see them as my home. One of my first impressions when I came here was, oh, people are probably going to be cold, maybe even harsh, not very friendly. But then, you talk for 10 minutes, and suddenly you're being invited over for borscht. That's something I really love about this country.
Останній чоловік буде цей так штурмувати будинок. Добре? Заєбісь.